Today we are in for a long one. What's up everyone? My name is Marcus from DM Photography, and in this video I'm going to share with you my photo scanning and editing process. Before we can get started, we need to load up this film holder from my Epson V850 Pro. This is the 35mm film strip holder. In case you're wondering why I have tape over these sliders here. So these sliders are to fix the focus. So when you buy an Epson V850 Pro and also some of the prior models, you have to calibrate the film holder to the right focus plane so that your scans are sharp. And what I find is that these sliders here are a little bit too loose. So that's why I tape them, that I can be certain that when I place the film holder into the scanner, that I have the correct focus height. Without further ado, let's load two film strips into the holder. I decided to go for one black and white film strip and one color film strip, so that you can see my black and white and my color editing process. So let's load the strips and the scanner, and I'll see you in a bit. Now that the film is loaded, we are ready to go. You will see me scanning with Silverfast AI Studio, and afterwards I show you the editing of photos with Luminar 4 and Capture One version 20. Let's get started. So here we are in Silverfast AI Studio 8.8. I have done the preview scan for both film strips already, so you see here the two strips that I was just loading into the film holder. On top we have the black and white film strip with the Ilford HP5. You see it also here on the left side in Negafix. And at the bottom we see the color film strip, which is a Kodak Ektar 100. The two images that I am going to scan for today is this image down here that I marked. You might have seen this shot also from my video where I was showing my favorite shots of 2019. As well as the black and white shot here that also was part of my favorite shots of 2019. So what we have now are the default settings after the scan. You see here also in the graduation curve, it's absolutely straight here on the left side. Same also here, no edits, nothing. Let's start with the black and white scan. Let's go into full view, so I will click on the zoom in, and what we will see here from the standard settings by just choosing the film, that the shadows are kind of weird. They are bright, but at the same time not really good. What I am going to do now is to show you something very important. So I will scan this one here and call it, you see it here on the upper left side, scan plane. And then I will do some edits and do a scan again. And then later when I import it into my photo editing software, you will see why it makes a lot of sense to pay attention to your scanning settings, because there are things that you cannot salvage from a wrong scan. So let's go ahead and scan this one. Okay, I fast forward the scan now. Let's edit the photo now. So first and foremost, what I always do is I will click Shift A, which basically does some auto correction here on the photo. So what you see immediately is that the image got brighter. The shadows got brighter as well, but we see a lot more detail here in the face of the lady and in the background. But for my personal taste and for the editing later, I think this is still a little bit too dark. So let's try and up the exposure on the left side by 1 stop. So this is already way better. Let's try and see 2 stops. Okay, this is overexposed. So what I will do with this scan is I will go 1 stop over and I will scan with this setting. You also see that the autocorrection of Silverfast changed the graduation curve a little bit, but overall I must say it looks quite good, and also I like the crop how it is. So let's now go ahead and also rename this file to scan correct, and I will now scan this one. Alright, fast forward it again, so the scan is done. Let's now zoom out again. Next up is the color photo. We will do the same here now. So I will zoom in. I will spare ourselves the scan with these wrong settings and immediately click on Shift A to see what the corrections are. You see immediately how Silverfast adjusts the curve here on the left side. The image looks way more balanced like that. The color profile Kodak Ektar 100 from Silverfast does an okay job. I'll show you later in the software what I am typically correcting. So with this, I would say, let's go ahead and also scan this photo. Alright, that's it. So I scanned both photos now, and it is time to switch over to the photo editing software. What I will do in this video is I will edit the black and white photo in Luminar 4. I bought Luminar 4 3 months ago and I'm playing around with it a little bit to find out if I want to switch definitely to Luminar 4 for my photos. The color photo I will edit in Capture One. So I switched away from Lightroom just a couple of weeks back because I want to force myself into this new workflow, and I think Capture One might be better suited for me. And I also hear on the net that the raw image converter from Capture One for especially Leica, when it comes to my Leica MD, is a lot better than the one from Adobe. So we will see those two softwares when I am editing the photos. Let's now first switch over to Luminar and do the edits on the black and white photos. So we are in Luminar 4 now, and I imported both of the black and white scans that I did earlier into Luminar. So we have here the dark one, where I basically didn't touch anything in Silverfast and just did a scan from the raw preview. And this image, you see that it is way brighter and way more balanced. This is where I did some minor edits in Silverfast before I scanned the photo. The point that I want to make in with these two shots is that it is worth a lot to pay attention how you configure your scan before you do the scan, because there are things that you cannot salvage from a wrong scan. So please pay attention before you hit the scan button, because Luminar, Lightroom, Capture One, and so on and so forth, they will not be able to save certain things. So let's start with the, in my opinion, wrong scan, or the just pure scan without any edits, so that you see what I mean. So what I do at the histogram now is I enable the clipping. This basically means that the software will show me if I blow out my highlights or I have basically dark shadows, so clipping in the shadows. We see that there are some dark areas here, which I don't mind because I actually want it to be way more dark at the bottom. And we don't have any highlights here, but just to demonstrate to you how that would look like if we would have highlights blown out, is I go up with the exposure and we see these red areas which indicate that it is way too bright. So let's reset this again. How I usually start is I adjust the curve here. You will find a similar curve like this in Lightroom as well, if you use Lightroom, or in Capture One. So I personally like the S-curve, especially with black and white photos. So I always like the highlights a little bit more bright and the shadows dark to have these contrasts. So you see the image already looks a little bit more balanced. Now I need to brighten it up a little bit because I didn't brighten it up in Silverfast. Now immediately what we see here is that these shadow areas are very, very ugly, and we will see in a minute that we cannot do a lot about that. So first and foremost, I will now go down a little bit with the highlights and also darken the shadows. So we see now at the bottom how the shadows get a little bit darker. We can also lower the blacks, but that's basically it. So the image looks okayish, but for my standards, I would say there is not a lot more we can do without heavy photo editing software, like for example with Photoshop. And even with Photoshop, I think we cannot do a lot here because the hair and the shadows are not refined enough for a software to really recover something. So this is more or less all that we can do with this photo. And I think it would be really a pity if I would always scan like that and have to live with these results. Now let's go to the better one and do all the final edits here, and I will show you a comparison as we go. The first thing that I want to do is I will do a black and white conversion here. I need to do that. I need to actually do that also on the other photo, just to be fair. This one is already converted to black and white. Because I scanned them in 48-bit color. The reason why I did so, and you might have seen that in the Silverfast software earlier, is because if I edit my photos in Capture One, Capture One does not open black and white TIFFs. It only opens RGB TIFFs. Luminar and Adobe Lightroom do not have this problem. Don't ask me why Capture One has this, but that is the reason why I typically scan all my photos in 48-bit color TIFFs. So let's get back to light and make also the S-curve here. So we will do similar edits to the other one. To be fair, we already see here how the shadows fall way nicer. And if I zoom in here, we now see the hair and also here the background way more defined than earlier. So what we will do now here is also enable the clipping just to make sure that we have no highlights blown out. So we immediately see here that the reflections in the windows are blown out. So I will reduce the highlights now. You see how those red areas disappear. I can highly recommend to every one of you to enable the exposure warning in whichever software you use, be it Lightroom, Luminar, Capture One, and so on and so forth, because that is the only chance where you can for real see that you don't have blown out areas or real blacks that you don't want. So these are now basically the same settings we had with the other photo, and immediately if you look at a direct comparison, this photo looks way better than the other one. So look at this. Here's the one where we didn't touch anything in Silverfast, and this is the one that I edited with basically the same edits, but the source material was way better. What I usually do as a first step, and I didn't do it here to have this direct comparison, is I would crop the image first. So let's do the crop. So crop for me is important, but I will always keep the aspect ratio of the camera. So with the Leicas, I always crop to 3:2, and with the Mamiyas 4:5. So let's go for a 3:2 here, and let's see what we can do with the composition. So what I think what would be cool is if we would have the face of the lady here and the person here on these third lines. So let's keep the crop like that, for example. So we have now the image cropped, we have the S-curve, which I like, and we have highlights and shadows under control. I think the general exposure is good enough. So the next step that I would do now is I would add another layer. So new adjustment layer. And what I would do now is I would put a gradient here, and I would put a gradient here from the bottom. And you will see now in a minute what this will do. It lowers, if I go down with the exposure, it makes the image at the bottom right darker. You will have these gradient filters also in Lightroom and of course in Capture One. They're just somewhere else in the menu. This is how it works here in Luminar. There's also a way of doing them here in the Pro settings in adjustable gradients. So these are two ways on how you can do it. What a cool thing about Luminar is you have layers. So you can have many adjustment layers and correction layers for your edits that you can enable and disable. So here, let me disable this one. Pay attention to the lower left of the image. You see, it's way too bright here. With the adjustment layer, it gets nice and dark. So I like this a lot more. So let's now add one more adjustment layer where I will now zoom into the photo and see if there's any dust that we need to remove. But I think I didn't see any dust or anything in this photo that needs to be removed. Yeah, it looks good. What we could do is we could erase, just to see how I would do it, we could erase these white dots here. So I could do this, this, and this, just to make it more pretty. And then I would click erase. And now Luminar would erase those, and I click done. And that's it. Good. So I would say from my perspective, this is all that I would do to this image. And this is also more or less the process that I'm using. I am not a very heavy retoucher, and this is good enough for me. Let's now switch over to Capture One, where I will show you my color process. All right, we are in Capture One now. As you can see, this software has a lot more options already right away when you look at the screen. This will be possibly my new go-to software to edit my photos, although I will keep playing around with Luminar to see how far I can get. The first thing that you realize when you look up here in the right upper corner is that I also enabled exposure warnings. So we see here in red the blown out sections, and in blue on the left side of the image the dark sections of the photo. So let's now go through the workflow as intended here in Capture One. As I mentioned in Luminar 4, what I usually do first is I will crop the screen or crop the photo. So what I will do now is I will crop with the aspect ratio of 2:3 here. Again, this is the 35mm Leica crop. And I really like that. I want my photos to look like intended. And what I will do here is I will crop a little bit more in. So maybe like that. That looks good to me. So this will be now our starting point for the edits. What I will also do is I will copy this one. So you see here in the bottom now that we have two versions of the photo so that we have a reference to compare it to. So what we see directly here in the original from the scan is that Capture One tells us that we have here blown out sections which are marked red. So what we need to do is we need to go up here in the exposure dialog and start working with these areas to get the image balanced. What I will still do, as I always do, is I will play around with the curve first. So here also I want to see what I can do with the highlights. So they are a little bit too high. So here I will go down with the curve. And the midtones I like, and the shadows I will pull later manually. So here I decide not to go for an S-curve. So I don't religiously follow the S-curve philosophy, but for this image I think it's better if we keep it like this. So now the next thing that I will do is I will reduce the highlights so far that those red sections disappear like this. So already see that the image is quite evenly lit now, and it already looks good, and we could almost say that we can save this file and be done with it and have a very nice scan of this Ektar 100 photo. But now you will see what I do with color photos and how much, in my personal opinion, they improve when you start retouching them for real. So first of all, I want to work on the shadows and midtones here. So I'm zooming in, and for my personal taste, this is a little bit too bright here. So what I will do is I will reduce the shadows just a bit, maybe like this, and also the blacks. And let's take a look. Okay, so this looks now better to me. We have a little bit more contrast, maybe a little bit less shadow. So we are at minus 48. Let's go to minus 40. Yes, exactly. I think this one looks good. So there is nothing else that I personally would do to this image because I exposed it already pretty well in camera. So when I did the light reading here, I think I nailed the exposure. So you'll see there's no point in playing around with the exposure to make it brighter or darker. It will not improve the image. So here I could rely on my Leica light meter, and it looks actually quite well. So the next thing is we go to the next screen up here on the upper right, and we have something called the color tab. So now I'm clicking on the color tab. And what we will do now is we will go to this color editor and choose this direct color editor, because what I want to do to this image is I want to change the blue tones. So now I click and hold the mouse button, and if I go to the left and right, as you can see on the right side, we change the hue, right? And with up and down, we change the saturation of the blues. So what I want to do is, you see, I give it a lot more saturation. I change the hue. So now we see what color it changed. It's this blue here, and the hue is at minus 18. The saturation is at plus 38. And this alone, for me, makes a huge difference. So the color grading is, for me, very important. I personally think that if you just take the negative as is, the color film by each manufacturer has a specific color temperature that they are made for, and every photo you take will be with that specific color temperature. Now, as we know, when you photograph under different light circumstances, this color temperature is actually different. So we would need to do this color matching in post, like I do now in Capture One, or people who print in a color darkroom, they would control these values in the darkroom to make the photo look like they would want it. So for me, this now looks good. The only thing that I want to try here in the color balance is I want to see if we can improve the midtones. So as you see here, we have shadow tones, midtones, and highlights, and we can edit them separately here in Capture One. And I want to see if it is worth making this photo a little bit more warm or a little bit more cold, and see if it adds anything to the photo. So now let's go and drag this a little bit into the warm, so we see how everything gets more yellow, so it gives it a little bit more of a summer feeling. Up here in the greens, I think there is nothing that we should do. This film is so good, it has no color cast that we need to correct here. But I think what I like, now that I look at it, is if we make it a little bit cooler and we keep it maybe like here. So yes, I like that. I think I would keep the midtones here a little bit more in the cool. I like the blue now of the water and the sky, and I like the midtones like that. So from my perspective, this is it when it comes to the basic edits. Now, what I'm going to try to do now is to see if I can salvage a little bit of the highlights here. You see on this tablecloth that it is actually quite bright, as well as this wall here on the van. I will add a new layer here, so an empty layer. And on this layer, I will now try and see if I can do some corrections. So I'll take a mask and I will draw now here over these bright areas. So let me do that. And then also here on the tablecloth. So we have this now masked. So I can go back to my exposure and you see everything is reset because we are now on a different layer. So what I want to try here is to see if I can reduce the highlights or the exposure to see if I can salvage some of that blown out area. So you see if I go here to the extreme, how it becomes gray. We don't want that. We want maybe just something like -5. Yes, -5 I think works for me. Cool. So last but not least, what I always do with analog photos, so scans, is I will see if I have any dust particles or stuff that I want to remove. I already see that up here we have definitely a spot that we need to remove, and I want to see if there are more areas that we need to fix. So for this, I will introduce a new layer. No, I clicked on the wrong one. I want to have a healing layer. And now I will take the hand tool and I will zoom in. So we see already we have a white spot here, here, and here. And what we can do now is we take the spot removal tool and we just click these away. So this looks good to me. Let's see what else is here. Oh, here we see a stripe that comes from the scan or the negative. So I will quickly remove the spots here. And then I will take a healing brush and I will try to heal this one here. See, so I need to correct this here a little bit because Capture One selected the wrong area. And here we go. This looks good. So this is fixed. Now we have here a couple of more spots that need some fixing. This looks good. Oh, here we also need some healing. And here as well. Perfect. So let's go further down. This looks good to me. I think this one here is also an error, not part of the scene. Yeah, other than that, I think the image is clean. Also, now we see here that I fixed the highlights on the tablecloth with that layer. We see the structure of the cloth. We see how much detail actually the film captures. So I think this is really nice now. All right, so that's it for this edit. This is all I would do to this photo. Now let's take a look how it looked in the beginning and how it looks now. So this is the scan. And this is after the edit. I think you can clearly see the difference, and also here why I personally think it makes a lot of sense to edit a photo, to give it a personal touch and to correct the color balance and the exposure to really have nice material that you can use then for web publishing or for printing later. So with this, I think we are done in Capture One. So that was a quite lengthy process. For those of you who are still with me, thank you for your patience. I hope you learned something. This was almost just a short version of me editing photos before I am really happy with the final result. I spent between 5 to 10 minutes on each photo, of course, without talking. So really just using the software to get it to the level that I want it to be. But for me, the process after taking the photo is also very important. I do not just pay attention to taking a photo and then not paying attention to the editing process. So for me, It's the whole story that makes the photo. And yeah, so I hope you learned something. For me, it was fun actually to first record this. I've never recorded any screen sessions of this type. While recording, I realized that this could be like a full-blown tutorial. It could go on for almost an hour probably, but I wanted to spare you that. And if you want to learn more about Luminar 4 or Capture One, I'm sure there are way better channels than mine with all the tips and tricks. But for me, it was just important to show you what I pay attention to, what are the minimum retouches I do to a photo, and to give you an impression how my raw material looks, and then the final images that you are used to seeing on my channel. Anyway, that's it for today's video. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, please give me a like. And also, if you like this type of content and you want to see more of this, consider subscribing to this channel because I will keep going. I have a full pipeline for this year. The next 9 videos are already lined up and I'm looking forward creating them for you. So thanks again for watching and I'll see you next time.